Welcome back to Top Notch Online TV, a paragon of excellence. Today with you is Tr.Risper, a teacher of English and Literature from PCA Kikuyu High School, an examiner as well as an author. If you were following the previous episode, we are tackling a story from Rwanda and Namibia, a story by the name of Neighbourhood Watch. We've already done the plot analysis as well as character and characterization. We now wish to move forward by looking at the themes, and the themes are closely related to the essay questions that usually will be tested in paper 3. About the themes, we're talking about the issues. Which issues are prevalent within the text? What is the writer trying to focus our attention on? And as we always remember, we're either using a noun phrase or a noun in portraying the themes. In Neighbourhood Watch, we have among the themes, the first one, let's talk about the plight of the street dwellers. In other words, you can also talk about life on the streets. From the word plight, plight is used to bring out a difficult situation whereby from the narration of Neighbourhood Watch, we are seeing that these people are not having a walk in the park. In fact, they are having a lot of challenges. Among the challenges under the theme of plight of street dwellers, the first one is there is lack of shelter. There is lack of shelter. The Neighbourhood Watch, we are realizing that they used to put up under a certain bridge, and they had carved out a niche for themselves. They had actually said, this is our turf, and no one was supposed to creep into their space. They've even had on the concrete that entails the bridge, they have inscribed the words NW, and that we are being told they were guarding their territory the same way the leopard guards its territory by peeing. The leopards pee, and it guards its territory, like you should not cross beyond this. And we are being told people in the street, they used to fight for these territories. It would even be leading to street fights. And they are calling that place that they are putting up under the bridge as their HQ. But one among the challenges, there is lack of shelter. Another plight, another difficulty, another challenge that the street dwellers encounter is difficulty in feeding. The difficulty in feeding, not because they have a problem physically, but because the food is scanty. We're even looking at them, they're living for today, and tomorrow will plan for itself. That is the kind of motto they're living by. With the difficulty in feeding, we see that they're rummaging, they're foraging through dumpsters in order to find food. And even as they're finding food that has been thrown out by people who don't need it or people who have more than enough, we still see that they have to contend with guards who at times are in bad moods, and they're threatening to beat them up to an extent that these people have to even bribe. You can imagine that you even bribe so that you get food that has been thrown out in dumpsters. Also, what type of food are they taking? We're talking about difficulty in feeding. What type of food are these people is made available to these people? We are looking at things such as, from the description from the writer, they're given mangoes that dimple at the slightest provocation. You just need to hold that mango in a wrong way, press somewhere wrongly, and the contents come spilling out. They're also talking about wrinkled carrots. That's the kind of food they are being given. Even when they're given left out the remains of food such as burgers, food such as fries, chips that have been left by people. Someone was eating and the person never got to finish their food. It is left out, but still they make sure that these salads, they are picked off feta. Feta is cheese. They pick out the good part of it and then they leave out the most miserable part of it. That is what they are given. And this is after even the kitchen staff have picked out what they want and the one they can't do with. the one that is in the most miserable of conditions, that is the one the Neighbourhood Watch is given, or the people. Neighbourhood Watch is just a representation of the street dwellers. Another challenge that these people encounter, they suffer diseases and malnutrition. Look at Elias. Elias is having some kind of consistent cough. We're even seeing that as he coughs, even what is coming out has some traces of blood. And as these people are getting worried, they're telling him that he needs to do something about it, but he says not to worry. Blood is part of life. But what type of a cough that has extended to an extent that it comes out covered in blood? A severe cough. Still on diseases, we cannot leave behind malnutrition. And I'll give the example of Omagano. Omagano is a girl, she's dressed in some kind of a spaghetti strap top. And you look at her limbs, the writer says they are stripped of fat. She's just lean. And the leanness comes as a result of poor feeding. She is malnourished. Food is not an assured advantage. Still on, how else are these people suffering the challenges they're getting? Number 4, there is competition. We are being told that the Neighbourhood Watch had to fight off competition. The competition from rival groups. And these rival groups, whenever they would find someone who was old, they would try to intimidate them by beating up someone like an old man like Elias, an old man like Lazarus. But then they knew better than to mess with Lazarus. As we had earlier seen, Lazarus is someone who is fierce. Therefore, they thought twice before they could attack someone like Lazarus. But then you're seeing that there was competition for these dumpsters. That is still yet another challenge. To an extent, they had to carve out their territory, the NY, the NW, the NW kind of, they've inscribed the words NW. And then another challenge you're seeing with these people, lack of decent clothing. The lack of decent clothing, these people are suspicious of themselves even as they're going to look for food in town. And the 3 of them were picked because at least their dressing was a bit decent. It wasn't decent, but it was better than what the others were wearing. I'll pick an example of what Omagano is wearing. A spaghetti strap top that makes her susceptible to days that it is cold, to the winter maybe. Another example I'll pick on the fact that they do not have decent clothing. I'll pick on someone like Martin. Martin is wearing some kind of trouser that does not even fit him. As much as he's trying to copy and admire Silas and try to walk like Silas, he has to stop from time to time so that he can pull up his baggy trouser. That is an evidence of indecent clothing. We also think that these people undergo something that we call insecurity. As much as people look at them as a source of insecurity, you can remember that when they are passing through the neighborhoods such as Eros and Avis, the neighborhoods of the rich people, the rich people are also seeing them as a source of insecurity. Therefore, the rich person is holding the leash of their dog, meaning that they won't think twice before unleashing the dog on these people. These people are therefore susceptible to a chance of being meted upon some kind of violence. Even when you're talking about the insecurity, the guards at times, they threaten them with a beating. They will beat them up for trespassing. Therefore, these people's security is not guaranteed. And also a case like the person who was killed, Amos. Amos was just subjected to violence. He was killed and nobody answered for it ever. Therefore, we see that they are also in danger. Apart from that, we're talking about the plight, the difficult situation that people on the street face. We're looking at stigmatization. Stigmatization, the way people treat you because of a certain condition that you have. And because they are street dwellers, we are looking at, they were made to stand out. Even the way they are walking as they are going to the town, they try to walk a bit slowly so that people near them will not catch a stench of the way they are smelling. That is, already they've been stigmatized. If they walk slowly, the wind will not be able to blow their stench to people. Therefore, they can mix within the crowd. But already they've been stigmatized. Even the way people look at them in the neighborhoods, holding the leash of the dog, not thinking twice before they can unleash the dog, that is also an aspect of stigmatization. That was the plight of the street dwellers as a theme. There's still another theme that emanates from the story, and this theme we shall call it the theme of violence and crime. Some of the points are intertwined, therefore I'll put them together, violence and crime. When you're looking at crime, I'll talk about the guards. It is criminal of the guards to sexually harass Omagano. They're soliciting sex from her so that they can go ahead and do what? And rummage through the dumpsters. They are making this girl to sleep with them before they can get into the dumpsters. That is criminal of them. It borders on sexual harassment. We're also looking at another crime. We are looking at Silas. Silas is a thief. He pilfers. He has a way of discovering things that had previous owners. A thing such as a cell phone. He is a pickpocket. He can pilfer a cell phone out of you. At the same time, we are looking at Silas who keeps darting his eyes. And when he sees something like a trolley that is unattended, he cuts it away, he pushes it away and uses it later. That is stealing. Stealing is still a crime. And then we're still looking at violence. Violence that borders on also crime. We're looking at the stabbing of Amos after he ran his mouth to the wrong guy. He uttered some curse words to someone, some rude words, and the person ended up stabbing him, and no one was ready to bear witness to the events of what happened. And then we still see another evidence, another illustration of violence when the police were now interrogating. The police were interrogating Lazarus and Elias. When they caught up with them, you were friends to Amos. What happened to these people? Are you sure you did not kill him for some 200 pounds? Are you sure? And then they are describing the interrogation as hard-booted questions. Later on, you're being told they were let go with a warning of swollen eyes and broken ribs. In other words, they were subjected to a thorough beating. The eyes were swollen from punches. The ribs were broken, maybe even from kicking. That is a theme of violence. We also see that it was not the first time that Elias has encountered violence. There was a time when he was during the insurgent years, when the rebels were fighting against the Afrikaners government of the white man, and there was a time he was captured and he was beaten days on end so that they can try and solicit information from him. That is it, my second theme, the second theme on violence and crime. We still see there is a theme of friendship. The Neighbourhood Watch has formed a friendship that encompasses the 5 of them. And within this friendship, they even share. We see that when the people who had gone for food duty, when they come back, as much as they had found some over-salted mashed potatoes and half a loaf of bread, it was shared amongst all of them. Even when it was the time to quench their thirst, we see that bottle of water was passed from one person to another. This is an evidence of friendship amongst them. And we're also seeing that Omagano aids the friends when it comes to getting the food, despite what she has to do, even if it means selling herself to the guards. And at the same time, she is the one who was responsible for cutting the hair of Elias and the others. It takes friendship to do that. Even when the food crew and the valuables crew, they meet up, they share their proceeds for the day. These are the ones of the valuables. They bring about newspapers that are used to start the fires, while the other people also share with them the food that they had found. And there's still another aspect of friendship. When Elias and Lazarus were captured, they were captured on the basis that they were friends to the dead person by the name of Amos. And also the reason they decided that they will no longer be going to Kamasadal is because the person who had killed Amos would think that because they are their friends, they'll be looking for their pound of flesh, they'll be looking for retribution. That shows that even that person who had killed Amos believed that these people were friends. Away from that, you're looking at another theme of poverty. Under the theme of poverty, we are seeing that these people foraging for food, these people lacking sleeping quarters, even living in the streets. Before someone can decide to live on the streets, they must have tried to exhaust all possible avenues. We're also looking at the guards rifle through the dumpsters and even asking for bribes. It seems that what they're being paid is not enough to sustain them. And also they sometimes beat the neighborhood watch to foraging through the dumpsters. They equally need what has been thrown out is a sign of poverty. Another illustration on the theme of poverty, we're looking at Elias and his crew decide to water their throats. And when they go to water their throats, they pick on a cheap whiskey. What would make someone to pick on a cheap whiskey instead of the best? It is as a result of poverty. Another theme we're going to look at, and it is closely related to poverty, is the theme of desperation. We see that people are getting to desperate, they resort to desperate measures when they encounter desperate situations. For instance, someone has just procured an abortion. The baby that they found in the dumpsters of Katutura might have been someone who was desperate to get rid of the pregnancy. Therefore, she gives birth to a child and then throws out the child. Might have been poverty. He or she couldn't have sustained that baby. Desperation, throwing out of the baby. Omagan also brings out an aspect of desperation when she has to sleep with these guards in order to be allowed to rummage through the dumpster. You can imagine this is something thrown away, but you still need to sleep with someone to get it. That is an act of desperation. Finally, we are looking at the theme of waste disposal in the cities. Waste disposal in the cities can be in two categories. How did the people in the poor neighborhood dispose their things? They used to mix up everything. And even when you go into rummaging through their stuff, most probably you wouldn't find anything of value. That is how the poor people disposed of their refuse. On the other side of the rich people, they used to sort through their garbage. What is recyclable, what can be recycled, they used to put aside. And in the dumpsters of the rich people, they could find usable things such as broken toasters. They would find even blenders that they could put in use or even go and sell. In fact, the poor people, when they juxtapose, the poor people only used to throw out things that they no longer needed. They would throw out something like wrinkled carrots, or even if they throw out salad, they would pick out the best from the salad, the feta that is a type of cheese. And these dumpsters used to attract a lot of competition from the other street dwellers. Now that we've gone through the themes, we are comfortable now to answer an essay or two from our English guru. From our English guru, I'll pick a question that is related to our topic for today. And from our English guru, I'll pick the question that says, people who live in the street face a lot of challenges. With reference to the Neighbourhood Watch by Remy Ngamije, validate the truth of the given statement. And just as I've always told my viewers, the themes and the essay questions are related. My first theme, I looked at the plight of the street dwellers, the same thing that the question is asking. And for an essay, it will always go through the following steps. It will go through an introduction, 4 well-explained points, and a conclusion. We now want to look at the keywords. The keywords, first of all, people who live in the street. And people who live in the street, by interpretation, let's look at the Neighbourhood Watch. The Neighbourhood Watch is just an representation. They are one among the group of street dwellers. Therefore, we're talking about the Neighbourhood Watch. Face a lot of challenges. Now, we are going to their plight. What are some of the challenges they face? And you make reference to how to do an essay question, the introduction and interpretation of the question. 4 well-explained points that cover the topic sentence, the illustration of the background information, as well as the clincher. I'm ready to begin. My introduction goes as follows. Life in the streets is not for the faint-hearted. This is a general type of introduction. We're talking about they're facing challenges. It is not for the faint-hearted. One finds himself in the streets after exhausting all possibilities and has to contend with various challenges that exist as discussed through the portrayal of the Neighbourhood Watch members. That one is already a good enough introduction that can suffice. Away from the general introduction, you can have your own. You can even talk about the contextualized. You talk about Elias and his members of the Neighbourhood Watch face a lot of challenges such as poor feeding, lack of shelter, indecent clothing, as well as, and you add another one, and then you go ahead and say, as will be discussed below. I'll read out the points that I'm using, and then, since you've done this one a lot, you can go ahead and develop each of the points mentioned. The first one we talk about, first of all, members of the Neighbourhood Watch usually get into fights over territory. That is one among the challenges. And as I was explaining myself, we were able to see that there is some kind of war over territories. And we can give the example. Now, as you're developing the points, you can talk about people who wanted to carve out a space for themselves. Therefore, they used to harass people such as an old man like Lazarus. We look at such kinds of fights. And even carving out the name NW. NW so that the territory is particular to them. That is one among the challenges. Another second point that will be brought out using a topic sentence. You say, secondly, street dwellers face the challenge of disease. The challenge of disease, we can use the example of Elias. Elias had a terrible cough, and for instance, he has a racking cough, pulling mucus through the back of his mouth, and it seems to get worse each day. It has even escalated to an extent that the mucus that he's spitting out also comes out accompanied with what is evident as blood. But he rubbishes the claims that he needs help. He says that blood is part of life and part of death. Point number 3, being in the streets also possesses a challenge of having access to decent clothing. And I gave the example of Omagano in her spaghetti strapped top, as well as another person by the name of Martin pulling up his trouser. And then we only need 4 points, but we've given as many as 5. And even as you're discussing that theme, the points were as many as even 7 or 8. The street also poses a challenge of food. We see that these people, for them to get food, what do? They have to rummage through the dumpsters, 1. They have to ward off competition from other street dwellers. At other times, they have to sell themselves, example of Omagano. At other times, they even get threatened because of that food. They'll be beaten because of trespassing. Therefore, we see that they also have a challenge of food. The last point, and now I'm having 5 points. Lastly, the street dwellers face a lot of violence. Silas has a habit of stealing, and you're being told if he finds something worthy of selling, he will sell and he will share the proceeds with his friends. At other times, they warn him if he if he is caught, we know that violence will be meted against him, but they tell him that he is on his own. That is a suggestion already that at other times he doesn't get away, he is caught and he is beaten. Away from the example of Silas, who pilfers and sometimes he's caught and beaten, we also get to talk about someone like Amos. Amos also, he had spoken to someone, he had rubbed someone the wrong way. He spoke rudely to someone, the person ended up stabbing him to death. And no one answered for that crime because he did not even have family to defend him. Having said that, you're seeing that street dwellers, they face a lot of challenges, people who live in the streets. Now, in conclusion, you already agreed a conclusion can be a summary of the main points and do not add a new one. It can as well be a point of advice to someone. Let me just read the one in English Guru. In summary, in conclusion, you can say, in conclusion, life in the streets is not a walk in the park, and it is mostly never out of a person's choice. We should always sympathize with street dwellers, taking into consideration all the challenges they face in the streets. The one that I've used takes the form of a point of advice. We should sympathize with these people, what they go through, and it is not even out of their choices. It is not out of their choice. It is not out of their wish. That is it for today. Until next time, I hope you've been able to gain a further understanding into the book. Let's meet next time. It's a goodbye.